I'm Amber Wilson, 28, struggling to make ends meet as a freelance graphic designer while my investment banker brother Ryan, 32, is the golden child of the family. At another painful family dinner, my father looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "When will you ever be successful like your brother?" My mother nodded in agreement. What hurt most wasn't their words, I was used to those, but Ryan's smirk instead of defending me. That night changed everything. Before I tell you how I turned my life around and showed them all what real success looks like, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family struggles and finding your own path. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family had all the appearances of perfection. Our colonial-style home with its manicured lawn was the envy of the neighborhood. My father, Thomas Wilson, was a finance executive who believed success could be measured precisely by your salary, the car you drove, and the schools you attended. My mother, Patricia, a former beauty queen, maintained our family image with the same perfectionism she applied to her appearance. They were respected in our community, and from the outside, we seemed like the ideal American family. Ryan emerged as the golden child almost from birth. 3 years older than me, he walked early, talked early, and seemed to absorb our parents' values like a sponge. By elementary school, he was bringing home perfect report cards that went straight to the refrigerator door. I can still picture those A+ papers, secured with apple-shaped magnets, a shrine to his intelligence. I wasn't a bad student, I consistently earned BS with occasional As, but my true passion was art. While Ryan solved math problems, I filled sketchbooks with drawings. While he memorized historical dates, I blended colors to create new shades. My parents viewed these differences with growing concern. "Drawing is a nice hobby, Amber," my mother would say, "but you need something practical to fall back on." When I was 11, I won first place in a regional art contest. My watercolor painting of our backyard in autumn was selected from hundreds of entries. The local newspaper even ran a small feature about it. I remember rushing home, article in hand, bursting with pride. "Mom! Dad! Look!" I waved the newspaper excitedly as I entered the kitchen. My father glanced up briefly from his coffee and Wall Street Journal. "That's nice, sweetie." My mother patted my head. "Very creative." Their lukewarm response confused me until Ryan walked in with news of his second-place finish in a state math competition. Suddenly, the kitchen erupted in celebration. My father stood up to shake Ryan's hand. My mother hugged him tightly. "This is going on the fridge," she exclaimed, taking the certificate from him. My newspaper clipping ended up in a drawer. My painting was hung in my bedroom rather than the living room where guests could see it. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When Ryan needed a private tutor for his SAT prep, my parents didn't hesitate to spend the money. When I asked for art supplies or classes, I was told they were expensive luxuries and that I should focus more on real subjects. The irony was that in our early years, Ryan and I had been close. Before the academic pressure intensified, he used to be my protector. I remember when I was 6, some neighborhood kids made fun of my frizzy hair. Ryan, 9 at the time, stepped between us. "Leave my sister alone," he said firmly. "She's cooler than all of you put together." I worshipped him for that. For years, I kept defending him whenever my friends pointed out how differently our parents treated us. "He's just really smart," I'd say. And I'm proud of him. By middle school, however, the gap between us had widened into a chasm. Ryan joined every academic club and played lacrosse. I joined the art club and was deemed not competitive enough by our father. Our rooms told the story perfectly, his walls decorated with trophies and certificates, mine with artwork that only I seemed to value. My parents' different investment in our futures became painfully obvious when we discussed college. For Ryan, they toured Ivy League schools, hired consultants to perfect his applications, and discussed which prestigious institutions would best serve his networking needs. For me, their guidance was limited to, pick somewhere affordable. Art school is expensive, and the return on investment is questionable. Despite their lack of enthusiasm, I loved art with an intensity that couldn't be diminished. Late at night, I'd work on my portfolio while the house slept, determined to prove that my passion wasn't just a frivolous hobby. I remember the feeling of peace that came over me when I created. It was the one time I felt completely myself, without the weight of comparison crushing me. Sometimes I caught my mother looking at my work with what seemed like genuine appreciation, but those moments were fleeting. As soon as my father entered the room, her expression would change, and she'd suggest I do something more productive with my time. Ryan witnessed all of this. Sometimes I thought I saw flashes of discomfort cross his face when our parents dismissed my talents, but he never spoke up. Perhaps he was afraid that defending me would cost him his pedestal. Or maybe he truly believed, as our parents seemed to, that his path was inherently more valuable than mine. By the time we reached our late teens, what had once been a close sibling bond had deteriorated into awkward holiday interactions and surface-level conversations. I missed my brother, the real Ryan who had once protected me, but I couldn't find him beneath the golden child persona that had consumed him. When Ryan was accepted to Yale, our parents threw a party. They invited family, friends, colleagues, and neighbors to celebrate their son's achievement. My father made a toast that I still remember word for word. To Ryan, he said, raising his glass, who has made every sacrifice worthwhile. Yale today, Wall Street tomorrow. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. I smiled from the corner, the dutiful sister, while swallowing the bitter knowledge that no such celebration would ever be held for me. 2 years later, I was accepted to Rhode Island School of Design with a partial scholarship. It was one of the top art schools in the country, an achievement that should have warranted at least some recognition. My parents' response was tepid at best. "It's not a full scholarship?" my father asked, frowning at the acceptance letter. "What's the total cost going to be?" When I told him, he whistled low. "That's a lot of money for an art degree, Amber." "It's one of the best design schools in the country," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Graduates get hired by major firms and companies." "We'll see," was all he said. While Ryan's education was fully funded by our parents, I had to cobble together my tuition through my partial scholarship, student loans, and part-time jobs. I worked at a coffee shop near campus, designed flyers for student organizations, and took commissions for portraits, anything to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Ryan sailed through Yale with the wind of our parents' financial support at his back. He joined a prestigious fraternity, studied abroad in London, and secured internships at top financial firms. Each success was chronicled in detail during our family phone calls and holiday gatherings. After graduation, Ryan landed a starting position at a prestigious Wall Street firm, thanks in part to one of our father's connections. He moved into a luxury apartment in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman. His starting salary was more than many people earned after decades in their careers. My post-graduation path was considerably rockier. I moved to a tiny shared apartment in Brooklyn with 2 other RISD graduates. We converted our living room into a makeshift studio where we worked on freelance projects between job applications. I applied to dozens of design firms, facing rejection after rejection before finally landing an unpaid internship at a small branding agency. "Unpaid?" my mother asked when I called to share the news. "Oh, honey. Maybe you should look into something more substantial." "It's how you get started in this industry, Mom," I explained. "It's a foot in the door." "If you say so," she replied, then quickly changed the subject to Ryan's first bonus. The financial contrast between our lives was stark. Ryan bought a German luxury car while I navigated the subway system. He took weekend trips to the Hamptons while I scoured grocery stores for sales. He invested in the stock market while I calculated whether I could afford both electricity and internet that month. During one particularly memorable Christmas, my father presented Ryan with an expensive watch. "For the rising star," he said proudly. My gift was a practical set of kitchen towels and a grocery store gift card. The message couldn't have been clearer. Ryan's career was worthy of investment and celebration, mine was barely worth acknowledging. As we gathered around the dinner table that Christmas, my mother asked Ryan about his recent promotion. He launched into a detailed explanation of his new responsibilities and the team he would be managing. My parents listened with rapt attention, nodding and asking follow-up questions. When there was finally a lull in the conversation, my mother turned to me. "And what about you, Amber? Any exciting projects?" I started to tell them about a branding project I had recently completed for a small local business, how the owner had loved my work and referred me to several friends. My father interrupted before I could finish. "That's nice, but is it leading to anything stable? Benefits? Retirement plan?" "I'm building my portfolio and client base," I explained. "That's how freelance design works." He shook his head. "Sounds risky to me. Not like Ryan's career track." By this point, I had begun to internalize the idea that I was the family disappointment. Despite graduating with honors from a prestigious design school, despite slowly building a client base in one of the most competitive cities in the world, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow failed. The only person who seemed to truly see my potential was my college friend Natalie. She had studied photography at RISD and understood the challenges of creative careers. "Your parents are stuck in an outdated definition of success," she told me over cheap wine in our tiny apartment. "They can't see that the economy has changed, that creative skills are valuable. You're talented, Amber. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Natalie's words were a lifeline during those difficult early years. When client feedback was harsh, when my bank account dwindled to double digits, when my parents' dismissive comments echoed in my head, I would remember her belief in me and find the strength to continue. Meanwhile, Ryan's career continued its meteoric rise. He was featured in a business magazine's 30 Under 30 list. He closed major deals. He dated models and executives' daughters. With each new achievement, the gap between us seemed to widen, and my parents' disappointment in my choices grew more palpable. What hurt most was that Ryan and I had almost completely lost the connection we once shared. Our conversations became superficial, centered around holidays and family obligations. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the brother I had known, a certain look, a shared joke about our mother's cooking, but those moments were fleeting, quickly replaced by the uncomfortable awareness of our vastly different standings in the family hierarchy. I didn't know then that everything was about to change. That a particularly painful family dinner would become the catalyst for transformation. That Ryan's smirk would be the final push I needed to redefine success on my own terms. The invitation came via text from my mother. "We're celebrating Ryan's promotion to senior vice president at La Grenouille on Friday at 7 p.m. Please be punctual. No, hope you can make it or would love to see you." Just the expectation that I would rearrange my schedule to celebrate another of Ryan's achievements. Under normal circumstances, I might have made an excuse. I had just received a rejection from a major client I'd been courting for months, and my bank account was looking particularly grim. But something compelled me to go. Perhaps it was the masochistic hope that this time would be different. That my parents might ask about my work or that Ryan might acknowledge me as more than his less successful sister. La Grenouille was exactly the type of restaurant my parents loved, French, expensive, with the kind of atmosphere that made you feel underdressed no matter what you wore. I arrived precisely at 7 p.m., wearing the nicest outfit I owned. A black dress I'd bought on sale 3 years earlier for a client meeting. My parents and Ryan were already seated at a corner table draped in crisp white linen. My father wore his standard power suit, my mother was impeccably dressed in designer wear. Ryan looked every bit the Wall Street success story in his tailored suit and confidence. "There she is," my mother said as I approached. She air-kissed both my cheeks. "You look nice." The pause before nice spoke volumes. "Congratulations on the promotion," I said to Ryan, sliding into the empty chair. He nodded. "Thanks. It's been a crazy few months getting there." "Ryan has been working 60-hour weeks," my father added proudly, as if extreme overwork was the ultimate badge of honor. "That's what it takes to succeed." The waiter appeared, and my father ordered an expensive bottle of champagne. Only the best for our son's big achievement. I sipped my water and tried to look happy. The champagne arrived, and my father proposed a toast. To Ryan, the pride of the Wilson family. Senior vice president at 32, on track to make partner before 40. We clinked glasses. I took a small sip of the champagne I knew I couldn't afford on my own and tried to ignore the familiar knot forming in my stomach. The dinner proceeded as these family gatherings typically did. My parents asked Ryan detailed questions about his promotion, his responsibilities, his team. They nodded approvingly as he described his increased compensation package and the company car that came with his new position. When there was finally a break in the Ryan celebration, my mother turned to me with her practiced socialite smile. "And what have you been up to, Amber? Still doing your little drawings?" The dismissive way she referred to my career, my passion, as little drawings, caused something to tighten in my chest. "I'm working on building my client base," I said, trying to keep my voice professional. "I just completed a rebranding for a boutique skincare line, and I'm waiting to hear back about a potential project with a sustainable clothing company." My father interjected, cutting into his expensive steak. "Sounds unstable. Any benefits with these gigs? Retirement plan? Health insurance?" "I purchase my own health insurance," I said quietly. "And I'm saving what I can for retirement." He shook his head. "That's the problem with these creative careers. No security. No clear path forward." "Not everyone values the same things, Dad," I said, feeling a rare spark of defiance. "Clearly," he replied, looking meaningfully at my worn purse beside me. "But at some point, you have to be practical. When will you ever be successful like your brother?" The words hit like a physical blow. I'd heard variations of this sentiment throughout my life, but never stated so bluntly, so cruelly. My mother placed her hand on my father's arm in a half-hearted attempt to soften his words. "Not everyone can be as driven as Ryan, dear. Amber has other interests." The way she said other interests, as if my career was a hobby, a diversion rather than my livelihood and passion, made my cheeks burn with humiliation. I looked to Ryan, hoping for some intervention, some acknowledgement that this treatment was unfair. Our eyes met across the table. And then he smirked. It wasn't an outright laugh or scoff. It was subtle, a slight upward curve of his lips, a flash of something like satisfaction in his eyes. But in that moment, the message was unmistakable. He enjoyed his position as the favorite, took pleasure in the contrast between our lives. In that instant, something broke inside me. Not my spirit, quite the opposite. What broke was the chain of seeking approval that had bound me for 28 years. What broke was the illusion that my family would ever see my value unless I forced them to. I maintained my composure through the rest of the meal, speaking only when spoken to, offering polite smiles when appropriate. But inside, a storm was brewing. By the time we left the restaurant, I felt like a stranger to myself, or perhaps, for the first time, truly myself. The drive back to my apartment was silent. No music, no phone calls, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional car horn in the distance. I parked outside my building and sat motionless for several minutes, replaying the dinner in my mind. When I finally made it upstairs to my tiny apartment, I closed the door and collapsed onto my second-hand couch. The tears came then, hot, angry tears that had been building for years. I cried for the little girl whose artwork was never good enough for the refrigerator door. I cried for the teenager whose college dreams were deemed impractical. I cried for the young woman trying to build a career without the support that had been so freely given to her brother. When the tears subsided, I reached for my phone and called Natalie. "They did it again," I said when she answered. "Another dinner celebrating Ryan. Another reminder that I'm the family failure." "You're not a failure," Natalie said firmly. "You're trying to succeed in one of the most competitive industries in one of the most expensive cities in the world. Without the support system your brother has." My dad asked when I would ever be successful like Ryan, I continued, my voice cracking. And Ryan just smirked. Your family is toxic, Amber, Natalie said after a pause. I've been trying to find a gentler way to say this for years, but it's the truth. They've created this dynamic where Ryan is the golden child and you're the scapegoat. And it won't change unless you change it. Her words hit me with the force of revelation. I had always sensed the dysfunction in my family, but hearing it named so plainly was both painful and liberating. What do I do? I asked. You stop playing their game, she replied. You define success on your own terms, and you work toward that, not toward earning their approval. Because let's be honest, would their approval even mean anything if you got it? Coming from people with such a narrow view of what matters? That night, staring at my ceiling, I made a promise to myself. I would no longer measure my worth by my parents' standards. I would build something meaningful, not to prove them wrong, though that would be a satisfying side effect, but to prove myself right. To validate the path I had chosen and the talent I knew I possessed. The smirk on Ryan's face had been the final straw, but it would also be the catalyst for everything that followed. The morning after that fateful dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The path forward wasn't about earning my parents' approval or competing with Ryan, it was about redefining success on my own terms and building something meaningful. I called in sick to my part-time job at the coffee shop and spent the day researching. I analyzed design trends, market needs, and potential niches. After hours of investigation, I identified a promising opportunity: environmental branding for sustainable companies. The green economy was growing, but many eco-friendly businesses struggled with bland, forgettable branding that didn't capture their mission or appeal to consumers. This was a space where my artistic sensibility could merge with business strategy. I could create designs that were not only beautiful but purposeful, helping companies committed to environmental responsibility stand out in the marketplace. I called Natalie that evening, energized by my discovery. I think I've found my niche, I told her. Sustainable branding. There's a real need, and it aligns with my values. That sounds perfect for you, she encouraged. What's your next step? I need a business plan, I replied. I've been thinking of myself as just a freelancer, but I need to start thinking like a business owner. Over the next 2 weeks, Natalie and I met regularly at my apartment, covering my small dining table with notes, market research, and financial projections. She had studied business as a minor and helped me structure my thoughts into a coherent plan. You need to charge more, she said bluntly, looking at my rate sheet. You're undervaluing your work. But will clients pay that much? I asked, nervous about pricing myself out of opportunities. The right clients will, she insisted. Especially if you position yourself as a specialist rather than a generalist. Specialists command higher rates. Armed with my business plan, I enrolled in online courses to strengthen my entrepreneurial skills. I studied marketing, client management, and basic accounting. Each night after my day job, I would spend hours absorbing information, filling the gaps in my education that had nothing to do with artistic ability and everything to do with running a successful business. As my vision for my future clarified, I realized I needed to create space for growth, both professionally and emotionally. The constant reminders of my family's disapproval were draining energy I needed elsewhere. I drafted a careful email to my parents. Dear Mom and Dad, I need to focus intensely on my career over the coming months, which means I'll be stepping back from family gatherings for a while. I value our relationship, but I need some space to pursue my professional goals without distraction. I'll check in occasionally by phone, but please understand if I'm not as available as usual. Love. Amber. Their response was predictably dismissive. Amber. If you're too busy to maintain family connections, that's your choice. We hope whatever you're pursuing is worth it. Let us know when you're ready to rejoin family activities. Mom and Dad. No questions about my goals. No encouragement. Just passive-aggressive disapproval. But for once, their response didn't devastate me. It confirmed that I was making the right choice in creating distance. Ryan occasionally texted during this period. Parents said you're taking a break from family stuff. Everything okay? His messages were superficially concerned but never truly supportive. I kept my responses brief and professional, treating him more like a distant acquaintance than the brother who had once protected me from neighborhood bullies. With emotional boundaries established, I threw myself into rebuilding my professional identity. I redesigned my portfolio website to reflect my new focus on sustainable branding. I created sample projects showcasing what I could offer to environmentally conscious businesses. Then came the challenging part, finding clients who aligned with my vision. I researched local businesses with environmental missions and crafted personalized pitches. Most ignored me. Some replied with polite rejections. The process was humbling and often discouraging. After weeks of persistent outreach, I finally connected with the owner of a small but growing chain of sustainable coffee shops called Green Bean. Cameron Fletcher had built his business on ethical sourcing and zero-waste practices, but his branding didn't reflect the company's values. It was generic and forgettable. "I like your portfolio," he said during our first meeting. "But you're asking for more than I was planning to spend on rebranding." "I understand," I replied, summoning my courage. "But consider this an investment rather than an expense. Strong branding doesn't just make your business look good. It communicates your values, builds customer loyalty, and justifies premium pricing." To my surprise, he nodded thoughtfully. "Let me think about it." 3 days later, he called to hire me. The Green Bean project was all-consuming. I created a comprehensive brand identity that captured the company's commitment to sustainability while feeling warm and inviting. The new logo, a stylized leaf emerging from a coffee cup, became the centerpiece of everything from store signage to packaging. When Cameron paid my invoice, the largest single payment I had ever received for my work, I felt a surge of validation. This wasn't just about money, it was proof that my vision had value in the marketplace. With that payment, I made 2 significant changes. First, I moved out of my shared apartment into a small but private studio with better natural light, a proper workspace where I could meet with clients. Second, I had my hair cut into a sleek, professional style and invested in a few quality wardrobe pieces that made me feel confident during client meetings. Natalie noticed the transformation immediately when she visited my new space. "Look at you," she said, smiling. "You're not just talking about being a business owner, you're becoming one." "I still have a long way to go," I admitted. "Yes, but now you're on your own path," she replied. "Not the one your family tried to force you down." The physical changes reflected a deeper internal shift. For the first time in my life, I wasn't making decisions based on what my parents might think or how I compared to Ryan. I was building something true to my values and abilities, something that felt authentically mine. As I settled into my new space and identity, the Green Bean project began generating results. Cameron reported increased customer engagement and social media mentions. Other local business owners noticed the distinctive branding and asked who was behind it. "My designer is amazing," I overheard Cameron telling another entrepreneur at a networking event I'd reluctantly attended. "She really gets what we're trying to do. Worth every penny." Those words, "worth every penny," echoed in my mind as I drove home that night. For years, I had internalized the message that my creative work was somehow less valuable than traditional career paths. Now a successful business owner was telling others that my contribution was not just valuable but essential. The journey I had begun the morning after that painful dinner was still in its early stages. There would be setbacks and struggles ahead. But as I looked around my new workspace, with the Green Bean materials displayed proudly on my design wall, I knew I had taken the first critical steps toward redefining success on my own terms. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that someday, perhaps sooner than anyone expected, my parents and Ryan would be forced to see me differently. Not because I had conformed to their definition of success, but because I had created my own. 18 months after the dinner that changed everything, I stood in my new office space in a converted industrial building in Brooklyn, watching as my first 2 employees settled into their workstations. Natalie captured the moment on her camera, insisting it needed to be documented. Amber Wilson Design is officially no longer a one-woman show, she said, snapping another photo. This is history in the making. The journey to this moment had been intense. After the Green Bean project, referrals had started coming in, slowly at first, then with increasing frequency. The sustainable coffee chain had seen a 20% increase in customer retention and had opened 2 new locations featuring my environmental branding. Other eco-conscious businesses took notice. A vegetarian restaurant hired me to revamp their identity. Then came a sustainable clothing boutique, a zero-waste grocery store, and a solar panel installation company. Each project built upon the last, allowing me to refine my niche and raise my rates accordingly. My portfolio grew stronger, focused exclusively on environmental branding for sustainable businesses. I was no longer competing in the general design market. I had carved out a specialized position that aligned perfectly with growing market demand. 6 months earlier, Amber Wilson Design had been featured in a prominent design magazine's Rising Stars section. The article highlighted my distinctive ability to translate environmental values into compelling visual narratives. I had framed the piece and hung it prominently in my apartment, a tangible reminder of how far I'd come. The financial milestones were equally significant. I had paid off my credit card debt, established an emergency fund, and was contributing regularly to retirement accounts. For the first time since graduation, I felt financially secure. And I had done it on my own terms, in a creative field my parents had dismissed as impractical. The growth of my business eventually necessitated expansion. I couldn't handle the workload alone anymore, which led to hiring Jamie, a talented junior designer from Parsons, and Zoe, an organized and efficient project manager who kept client communications running smoothly. My new office occupied the corner unit of a renovated factory building, with high ceilings, exposed brick, and large windows that flooded the space with natural light. It wasn't the corner office in a Manhattan skyscraper that my father would recognize as success, but it was beautiful, functional, and mine. As my professional life transformed, my relationship with my family remained distant but civil. I called my parents once a month out of duty, keeping conversations brief and surface level. They had noticed the changes in my life, my improved financial situation, my growing business, but seemed reluctant to acknowledge them fully. "It's nice that your little design business is doing well," my mother had commented during one call. "Is it sustainable long-term, though?" "It's grown every quarter since I started focusing on environmental branding," I replied evenly. "And I've just hired 2 employees to keep up with client demand." There was a pause on the line. "You have employees now?" "2. And I'm considering adding a 3rd by year-end." Another pause. "Well, that's impressive." It wasn't exactly enthusiastic validation, but coming from my mother, it was significant progress. Ryan had been attempting to reconnect more frequently in recent months. His texts had evolved from superficial check-ins to more personal messages. "Saw your feature in Design Monthly. Pretty cool, sis. Mom mentioned you've hired staff. Congrats on the growth." I responded politely but maintained emotional distance, unwilling to forget the years of complicity in our parents' unequal treatment, or that smirk that had finally pushed me to break free. Then came an unexpected message: "Any chance you'd be interested in consulting on a project at my firm? We're looking to rebrand our sustainable investment division, and you're the best in that space." Would be a paid gig, of course. The irony wasn't lost on me. My brother, the golden child whose career path had always been deemed superior to mine, was now seeking my professional expertise. For a moment, I considered declining out of spite. But the business owner in me recognized the opportunity for what it was: a chance to expand into the financial sector, with a high-profile client that would open doors to similar institutions. "I'd be happy to discuss it," I replied, attaching my consultation rates, which I knew were substantial. "Here's my availability for next week." He didn't balk at the figures. "Thursday at 2 p.m. works. I'll send calendar details." The meeting with Ryan and his team was surreal. I entered the gleaming skyscraper where he worked, rode the elevator to the 43rd floor, and was escorted to a conference room with panoramic views of Manhattan. Ryan greeted me professionally, introducing me to his colleagues as Amber Wilson, the founder of Amber Wilson Design and one of the leading experts in environmental branding. Not my sister or an artist. A founder. An expert. I presented my portfolio and approach, answered questions, and outlined how I would tackle their rebranding needs. Throughout the meeting, I caught Ryan watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between surprise and reassessment. The project was approved the following week. Rebranding the sustainable investment division of Ryan's firm became the largest contract Amber Wilson Design had secured to date. It required adding that third employee sooner than expected and renting additional office space. The work was challenging but rewarding. I created a visual identity that balanced the conservative trust signals needed in financial services with authentic environmental commitment. The result was sophisticated, distinctive, and effective. When the rebrand launched, it received industry attention. A financial services publication ran a feature on the initiative, including an interview with me about the design process. The exposure led to inquiries from 3 other financial institutions interested in similar projects. 8 months after that first meeting with Ryan's team, I found myself at the Environmental Branding Awards, nominated in the financial services category. Natalie accompanied me to the ceremony, both of us dressed in formal attire we would have previously considered beyond our budgets. Amber Wilson Design, for the Sustainable Futures Initiative at Wilson Morgan Financial. Hearing my company's name called as the winner was a moment of pure validation. As I walked to the stage to accept the award, I caught sight of the audience, creative professionals, business leaders, and influencers in the sustainability space, all applauding my work. This was success on my own terms. Not measured by my parents' narrow definition or in comparison to Ryan's career path, but by the impact of my creativity, the growth of my business, and the respect of my peers. Later that evening, as Natalie and I celebrated with champagne that I could now easily afford, she raised her glass in a toast. To defining success for yourself, she said. And to proving that creativity has value, monetary and otherwise. I clinked my glass against hers. And to friendship that sees potential even when family doesn't. Speaking of friendship, Natalie said, setting down her glass, there's something I need to ask you. She reached into her evening bag and pulled out an envelope. Will you be my maid of honor? Mark proposed last weekend. Tears filled my eyes as I hugged my friend, the one person who had believed in me consistently through years of struggle and self-doubt. At her wedding 3 months later, I gave a speech that moved many guests to tears. I spoke about true friendship, how it nurtures potential, celebrates success, and provides honest guidance through difficult times. Natalie saw me clearly when others didn't, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion. She reminded me of my worth when I forgot it. She helped me rebuild when I needed to start over. What I didn't say, but what hung in the air between us, was the contrast between her support and my family's dismissal. The comparison wasn't necessary to articulate, it was evident in the thriving business I had built, the confidence I now carried, and the genuine joy I felt celebrating her happiness. As I returned to my seat after the speech, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I felt genuinely proud of myself without seeking external validation. The path hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but I had proven, to myself most importantly, that success could be achieved on terms that honored my talents and values. The transformation that began with Ryan's smirk and my father's cruel question was now complete. Or perhaps more accurately, it had evolved into something beyond mere reaction to their judgment. What had started as a desire to prove them wrong had become a journey to prove myself right. 3 years after that pivotal dinner at La Grenouille, I sent my parents and Ryan an invitation to dinner at 11 Madison Park, a restaurant even more exclusive than those my father typically chose. The occasion, as stated on the invitation, was celebrating Amber Wilson Design's 3rd anniversary and expansion. In the years since establishing my agency, I had maintained limited contact with my family. Monthly phone calls with my parents. Occasional professional interactions with Ryan. Holiday gatherings where I made brief appearances, shared minimal information about my life, and left early. This would be the first time I had invited them into my world rather than entering theirs. The first time I had positioned myself as the host, the successful one with achievements to celebrate. The shift in dynamic was intentional and, I hoped, powerful. They all accepted, though my mother called to ask if the reservation could be moved to accommodate my father's golf schedule. I politely declined to change it. Another small but significant boundary. On the evening of the dinner, I arrived early to ensure everything was perfect. I wore a custom-designed suit in deep emerald, a color I had always loved but my mother had discouraged. It doesn't flatter your complexion, dear. My hair was styled professionally, my jewelry subtle but expensive. I looked successful by any standard, including my parents. They arrived together, my father driving his luxury sedan with my mother in the passenger seat and Ryan in the back. The dynamic was so familiar it almost made me smile, the family unit, with me as the outsider. Except tonight, I wasn't joining their world. They were entering mine. "This is quite a restaurant choice," my father commented as we were seated at one of the best tables in the house. "Special occasion rates only, I assume?" "Actually, I've become something of a regular," I replied truthfully. The restaurant's commitment to sustainability aligned with my brand values, and I often brought important clients here. The chef does remarkable things with local, seasonal ingredients. My mother glanced around at the elegant decor. "It's certainly impressive." "Congratulations on the anniversary," Ryan said, seeming genuinely supportive for once. 3 years is a significant milestone for any business. "Thank you," I replied. "It's been an incredible journey." As we settled in with our menus, I noticed subtle changes in my family. My father seemed less domineering, my mother less perfectly composed, and Ryan less arrogant. They were slightly off balance in this environment where I was clearly comfortable and they were the newcomers. Once our first course arrived, my father cleared his throat. "So, tell us about this expansion you mentioned in the invitation." "Amber Wilson Design is opening a second office in San Francisco," I explained. "The sustainability market is booming on the West Coast, and we've signed contracts with several major clients there. I'll be splitting my time between both locations initially." "2 offices," my mother said, her eyebrows rising slightly. "That's substantial." "The business has grown beyond my expectations," I continued. "We now have 12 full-time employees between design, account management, and operations. The San Francisco location will add another 8 positions. 20 employees," my father said, doing the math aloud. "You're responsible for 20 people's livelihoods." The surprise in his voice was evident. In his world, success was measured in precisely these terms: employees managed, revenue generated, expansion achieved. I had met his criteria for success, just not in the field he would have chosen. "What's your annual revenue?" he asked bluntly. My mother shot him a look. "Thomas, that's rather personal." "It's fine," I said calmly. "We crossed the 7-figure mark last year. This year we're projecting 40% growth with the expansion." The table fell silent. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. My mother's eyes widened. Ryan looked down at his plate. "I had no idea," my father finally said. "Why didn't you tell us things were going so well?" The question hung in the air between us. Why hadn't I shared my success with them? The answer was complex but boiled down to a simple truth: their approval had stopped being my goal. "I've been focused on building something meaningful," I replied carefully. "Something that reflects my values and utilizes my talents." The external validation became secondary to creating work I'm proud of. "Well," my mother interjected with forced brightness, "we always knew you would find your way eventually. Your father and I are just pleased you've finally found some stability." The attempt to retroactively position themselves as supportive parents was so transparent it would have been amusing if it weren't so frustrating. "Did you?" I asked quietly. Because I remember being told repeatedly that my career choice was impractical. That I would never achieve real success as a designer. That I should find something stable, something like Ryan's path. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My father shifted in his seat. My mother dabbed at her lips with her napkin. Ryan stared at his water glass. We may have been concerned about your future, my father finally said. Creative fields can be unpredictable. They can be, I agreed. But they can also be incredibly rewarding, both personally and financially. I wish you had trusted my judgment about my own abilities and passion. We wanted what was best for you, my mother offered weakly. You wanted what you thought was best, I corrected gently. Based on your definition of success, not mine. The main course arrived, providing a brief respite from the tension. As we ate, the conversation shifted to safer topics, the restaurant's renowned chef, the unusual preparation techniques, the impeccable service. After dinner, as we waited for dessert, Ryan excused himself to take a phone call. When he returned, his expression was troubled. Everything okay? I asked, more out of politeness than genuine concern. Just work, he replied vaguely. My parents departed shortly after dessert, my father insisting on paying the bill despite my protests. My mother hugged me goodbye with unusual emotion. We're proud of you, Amber, she whispered, though whether she meant it or was simply responding to the evidence of my success was unclear. As they walked toward the valet stand, Ryan lingered behind. Can we talk for a minute? He asked. Privately? We moved to the restaurant's elegant bar area where soft lighting and well-spaced seating offered some privacy. I owe you an apology, he said after ordering a scotch. For that dinner 3 years ago. For a lot of things, actually. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. I saw your face when I smirked, he admitted. I knew it hurt you, and I did it anyway. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. Why did you do it? I asked, the question that had lingered in my mind for years. He sighed deeply. Because in that moment, it felt good to be the favored one. To have something you didn't. It was petty and insecure and completely unfair to you. The admission surprised me. I had expected deflection or minimization, not accountability. You never stood up for me, I said quietly. All those years, all those dinners and holidays where they dismissed my work, my choices. You were there for all of it, and you never once said, hey, that's not fair to Amber. I know, he replied, looking down at his drink. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of losing my position. Of becoming the disappointment instead of the golden child. I saw how they treated you, and I didn't want that for myself. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. It was cowardly. The honesty was unexpected and, I had to admit, somewhat disarming. There's something else you should know, he continued. My marriage ended last month. Rebecca moved out. This was news. I had met his wife only a few times at family gatherings. She had seemed perfect for him, ambitious, polished, from a good family. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, unsure how to respond. Don't be. It needed to end. He took a sip of his scotch. She wanted the life our parents approved of, the status, the appearance of success. And for a long time, so did I. But lately. He trailed off, staring into his glass. Lately? I prompted. I've been having panic attacks, he admitted. At work, at home. The doctor calls it high-functioning anxiety. Apparently, I've been operating in fight-or-flight mode for years. The promotion, the expectations, the constant pressure to achieve more, it's been crushing me. The revelation stunned me. Ryan, confident, successful Ryan, had been suffering silently while projecting perfection. I never knew, I said. No one did. That was the point. He looked at me with unexpected vulnerability. Watching you build something meaningful, something authentic to who you are, It made me question everything. My career choices, my marriage, the values I've been pursuing. The conversation shifted something fundamental between us. Not erasing the past, but perhaps creating an opening for a different future. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know exactly," he replied. "But I'm seeing a therapist. Considering a career change, maybe something with more direct impact. I've been volunteering with an environmental nonprofit on weekends. It's been fulfilling in a way my job never has been." We talked for nearly 2 hours at that bar, having the most honest conversation of our adult lives. About our parents' expectations and the different ways they had shaped us. About the competitive dynamic that had replaced our childhood closeness. About the possibility of rebuilding something new between us, not based on our family roles but on who we had become as individuals. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, Ryan asked hesitantly, "Do you think we could get coffee sometime? Just to talk?" I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and trust would need to be rebuilt slowly. But there was something genuine in his apology, something transformative in his vulnerability. "I'd like that," I replied. "But Ryan? This time, we meet as equals. No more golden child and disappointment. Just two adults figuring out life on their own terms." He nodded, understanding the boundary. Equals. I'd like that too. In the weeks and months that followed, I maintained the boundaries I had established with my parents. Our interactions remained cordial but limited. They made occasional overtures, sending articles about successful design firms, asking more questions about my business, but decades of dismissal couldn't be erased by a few months of belated interest. With Ryan, though, something new began to take shape. Our coffee meetings became regular occurrences. He left his investment firm to join an impact investing fund focused on environmental sustainability, a significant pay cut but, as he put it, "I can finally sleep at night." After his divorce was finalized, he moved to a modest apartment, sold his luxury car, and began simplifying his life in ways that would have horrified our status-conscious parents. Our relationship would never return to the innocent closeness of early childhood, before competition and parental favoritism had come between us. But we were building something new. A friendship between adults who understood each other's struggles and respected each other's choices. The journey that began with pain and rejection had led to unexpected places. To success defined on my own terms. To boundaries that protected my well-being. And perhaps most surprisingly, to a relationship with my brother based not on family obligation but on genuine connection. 3 years after that clarifying dinner with my family, I stood on a stage in San Francisco, accepting the Environmental Design Award for a comprehensive campaign my agency had created for a major corporation's sustainability initiative. Looking out at the audience of industry leaders, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought me here. Amber Wilson Design now operated from offices in New York and San Francisco, with a team of 28 talented professionals dedicated to helping environmentally responsible companies communicate their values visually. Our client list included everything from small local businesses to Fortune 500 corporations committed to sustainability. Earlier that month, I had been featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 list, recognized not just for business success but for revolutionizing how companies express environmental commitments through authentic visual storytelling. The article had mentioned my RISD background, my specialized niche, and the rapid growth of my agency, but nothing about proving anyone wrong or seeking validation. Because those motivations had long since evolved into something more meaningful. My personal life had transformed alongside my professional one. I had purchased a sunlit townhouse in Brooklyn, renovated to reflect my aesthetic while incorporating sustainable materials and energy-efficient systems. The spacious home office allowed me to work remotely when not traveling between coasts, and the garden provided a peaceful retreat from business demands. Perhaps most fulfilling was the mentorship program I had established for young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Remembering how my own creative path had been dismissed as impractical, I created opportunities for talented students who lacked financial support or encouragement. The scholarship fund in my name at RISD covered tuition for 2 students annually, with internship positions at my agency guaranteed upon graduation. My relationship with my parents remained cordial but distant. They had made efforts to show interest in my career once its success became undeniable, but our interactions remained superficial. I had accepted that some people's capacity for growth and change was limited, and that protecting my own well-being sometimes meant maintaining emotional distance. Ryan and I, however, had developed a genuine friendship following his divorce and career change. After leaving investment banking, he had found purpose working for an impact investing firm that funded environmental startups. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He now evaluated the financial potential of the very kinds of companies I helped brand. We met for dinner monthly, no longer as the golden child and the disappointment, but as siblings who had each found our own path to meaning and fulfillment. During one particularly meaningful conversation, Ryan admitted that watching my transformation had inspired his own. "You had the courage to define success on your own terms," he told me. "Even when everyone told you it was impossible or impractical." I needed to see that before I could question the path I was on. This journey had taught me lessons I never could have anticipated when sitting at that painful dinner years ago, watching my brother smirk as my parents dismissed my ambitions. I learned that true success isn't measured by income alone, though financial stability provides important freedom. Real success lies in creating something meaningful, something that reflects your values and utilizes your unique talents. I discovered that family dynamics can shape us, but they don't have to define us. The patterns established in childhood, the golden child, the scapegoat, the peacemaker, can be recognized and consciously abandoned in adulthood. I realized that some people will never see your worth clearly, and that's about their limitations, not yours. Seeking validation from those incapable of providing it is a path to perpetual disappointment. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most painful moments contain the seeds of transformation. That brother smirk, that cutting question from my father, "When will you ever be successful like your brother?" had provided the catalyst I needed to break free from unhealthy patterns and build a life aligned with my authentic self. Not everyone in my position would have responded the same way. Some might have continued seeking approval, adjusting their lives to fit others' expectations. Some might have abandoned their talents entirely, convinced by repeated dismissal that they had no value. The fact that I found a different path wasn't just about determination, it also involved privilege, opportunity, and the support of people like Natalie who saw potential where my family didn't. As I prepared to leave the stage after accepting my award, I glanced at my phone and saw a text from Ryan: "Congrats, sis. Well deserved. Proud of you." The message required no response but brought a smile to my face. Not because I needed his approval, but because it represented how far we'd both come from that defining dinner years ago. The journey from that smirk to this moment hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been financial struggles, self-doubt, and plenty of setbacks along the way. But standing on that stage, recognized for work that aligned perfectly with my values and talents, I felt a profound sense of peace. Success, I had learned, wasn't about proving others wrong, though that had been a powerful initial motivator. True success was about proving yourself right. About honoring your gifts, following your authentic path, and creating something meaningful in the world. That dinner years ago had been painful, but I now felt genuine gratitude for the clarity it provided. Without that moment, without my father's cutting question and my brother's dismissive smirk, I might have continued seeking approval that would never come, rather than building a life worthy of my own approval. So what's your definition of success? Is it aligned with your authentic self or shaped by others' expectations? Have you experienced moments where painful rejection became the catalyst for meaningful change? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this message today. Remember, true success isn't about impressing others, it's about creating a life that honors your unique gifts and values. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next video.